Oh.
The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop, which have been serving the greater West Lawn area delicious food for over 70 years. You are listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show,
Boring.
a weekly podcast about sports since 2011,
Don't you ever get tired of being wrong all the time?
with a focus on football.
Second and goal. This guy has had some years.
Al, I've got to tell you, in a pressure situation, I don't know if I have ever seen anybody be better than Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Wow, what a drive.
4th and 1. Burrow trying to keep it down. Gets spun down, gets it away. Incomplete. Rams down. Running down to celebrate with a defensive play.
And guess who?
Of
Guess who?
course,
I mean, you don't even have to think about it.
pointing to the ring finger.
When everything was on the line for the Rams, yes, we know it was Aaron Donald.
But the Rams were built to win the Super Bowl, and they have sealed the deal.
Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and with me momentarily will be co-host J-Raff, though not here at the moment, but we will forge ahead. And it's been a rough start. I noticed that I had the dates wrong, not only for the episode slide, which was wrong at first, and then when I put up the correct episode number of 361, that's where we're at right now, I noticed that I entered the year 2021, which it is not. It is 2022, July 17th, 2022, and the Joe Mays and JR Show is back for the first time in a month. It's been that long, and that's what the summer does to us. It's crazy. Crazy weekends, crazy things happening all over, lots of vacations and trips and activities with the kids. A lot of fun, but that means that this show tends to become a little bit hit or miss. But here tonight to talk more NFL, and I mean, now it is NFL preview season. It's July 17th, 2022, and in about a week's time, a bunch of teams will be reporting for training camp, and I think within 10 days from now, every team will have reported for NFL training camps. So, I mean, we're getting to the most spectacular time of the year, and couldn't be more thrilled and happy about that. But tonight we'll be talking about the North Division, so we have 8 teams to cover in both the NFC and AFC North. And there are some interesting teams there because there's a few unique situations with quarterbacks and teams that maybe overachieved last year. Can they repeat? Some that underachieved, especially due to injuries, can they bounce back? And we're going to cover all of that. But before we do, let me throw up some contact information and thank our sponsors. And you can contact us via the Mays Sandwich Shop email inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. We do still have the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline, 215-315-3199. We have not used that for a very, very long time. But you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Joe Mays and J-Raff. We would love to hear from you, and the email inbox is the best way to do that, but you surely can do so on social media as well. We will get started here with the NFC North first. That's where we'll be headed, and honestly, I think it's a struggling division. The Packers have seemingly run away with it for a number of years, and that's what happens when you have someone with the talent and ability of Aaron Rodgers. Despite my distaste for him as a person, as a quarterback, he's obviously very, very talented and has directed the Packers to numerous division championships. I do kind of take some solace in the fact that his teams have spectacularly underachieved in the playoffs. It's tough to have someone of that caliber and only win one Super Bowl, but that's where the Packers are at. and obviously they are I would think, the odds-on favorites by many sports books to repeat as division champs and be one of the better teams in the NFC, just based on what they have and what they're bringing back. So we are going to do this a little bit differently than we've done in the past. If you watched any of our other preview shows that we've done, we have been tackling them, I believe, alphabetically by team or mascot name. So in the NFC North, we're talking about Packers, Lions, Bears, and Vikings. So we're going to start in Chicago first. So let me pull up my information here on the 2022 Chicago Bears. And the biggest thing for them is they have a new coaching staff. A new head coach for the Chicago Bears, Matt Nagy, was relieved of duties. And former Indianapolis assistant coach Matt Eberflus was brought in. They were 6-11 in 2021, another down year for the Bears, but it was the first year of rookie or new quarterback and rookie Justin Fields, so he's entering year 2. There are many people that think the Bears are one of the worst teams in the NFL. I don't know if I'm ready to go that far, because I think the talent that Justin Fields possessed is there's a high ceiling there, but I do agree with them when they think that they don't have much other talent offensively. They have one of the weaker offensive lines and perhaps the weakest receiving core in the NFL. Speaking of underachieving, joining me now is co-host J-Raff. So the king underachiever right here.
Well, I know July is your favorite month for sports, so I was like, I'll just add to that,
Yes.
just do my part.
We're in the deadest of dead periods.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
Nothing happening today,
I feel like
including the MLB draft.
Wednesday is like the peak of like sports, like everything sports, right?
What, it's because it's ESPYs? Is that the
Well,
ESPYs?
there's like no
There's
baseball.
nothing.
Like,
Yeah.
they should do the draft on Wednesday.
Right. There's a lot of things that could be moved around in July to make this better. Honestly, to me, and we've had this discussion before, I wish the MLB All-Star Game was around the 4th.
Yeah.
Make that a whole 5-day thing.
Right.
Do like the home run derby on the 3rd, have the 4th, and then have the game on the 5th or something.
Right.
Like
And
that.
imagine on the 4th, and I know this, but put it on in a 4:00 time slot, so you have fireworks at the end. Or I'm thinking you could do it the night before too. Imagine home run derby and there's fireworks every time.
Yeah.
They hit
Oh,
the
yeah.
potential is so there. And oh my gosh, there was that thing I sent you a couple weeks ago, and you raised a valid point, especially specifically this year. But it's NFL owns Thanksgiving, NBA to a larger extent owns Christmas Day. You could make an exception
most
this year,
years,
right?
I'd say.
And it's you could even say well, it's harder now, but college football with New Year's, but also NHL gets big with the Winter Classic on or around New Year's a lot of times now too.
An attempt is made.
The baseball has the 4th of July sitting there.
And they just are like,
And they
no,
don't
no.
And don't get me wrong, most of the teams, but the Phillies didn't play this year. That's
Yeah.
why it popped up
That
on
was
a lot
weird,
of my
yeah.
things. But they could build so much out of that. I was thinking,
And it's closer to the middle of the year.
and I know it becomes a separate thing, but why is that not when they're doing the Field of Dreams game? You could tie it together. I know they could make it separate things, so they wouldn't have to make it the same
So
thing.
when we have a sit down with your buddy and your
Oh.
favorite commissioner of all time, Rob Manfred, we'll make sure to ask him these questions.
So I've been thinking about Manfred because someone sat down with him at ESPN and did this long piece about how he's so hated, and they straight up asked him do you hate baseball? Because lots of people think you do, and he kind of scoffed at the thing, but then and he
thought about it for a while.
right. But one of the key things was, and I thought of this later, was about how he just joked about the trophy being a hunk of metal,
Right,
saying nobody
yeah.
cares about it, and so. And look, I'm for some of the changes Rob Manfred has made, but he is also just a terrible commissioner. he's bad. And this is
Tell us how you really feel.
Well, and it's another thing that's a little different, but it just reminds me of this a little bit, was just like with the free agency in hockey. And you probably saw this stat the other day, but Nikola Jokic, who I'm not a huge fan of, mostly because of he draws the attention away from Embiid, and I don't agree with that. But he signed an extension, and this is not to knock that, right? He signed the max extension that he gets, and there are escalators based on making all NBA first teams and stuff like that, and all kinds of stuff. But he signed like a 5-year extension worth like $260 million or something like that. At that point, all 35 NHL free agents that had signed did not equal that amount of money.
Crazy.
Like, and it, again, it's different, but in reality, you're paying more people, but the revenue is different. And, a couple days later, what was the headline? NBA sets a revenue record.
Yeah.
They broke $10 billion this season. Well,
that'll do it.
And that's where, Adam Silver is not perfect. He's not a perfect commissioner, but from a business standpoint, he has done many positive things for the NBA. And,
right.
Players aren't signing $250 million contracts without the owners doing well too. That's how that looks. And this similar thing in the NFL. You see these numbers, these quarterback numbers, especially going just absolutely insane.
Bonkers, yeah.
And you know what else is kind of nice? When Jerry sits down there and he bought the Cowboys for like $100 million or a little over that, whatever it was.
$6 billion or something.
Now he's
ridiculous.
watching teams that are not the Cowboys sell for $4.5 billion. Yeah, he's
happy.
He's happy. Yeah.
He's definitely happy. So I was in the middle of starting the NFC North. I just started I talked a little about Rodgers and the Packers just briefly to say that
your favorite.
How dominant they've been, and obviously they should be the odds-on favorite in the NFC North. But we're gonna do what we've been doing, which is alphabetical by team or mascot name, whatever you want to call it. So we're with Chicago. So I've been talking about how Nagy is gone, Eberflus is in, but there's a lot of people, and I'm honestly basing a lot of this on what Ross Tucker has said, because he is not a fan of the talent and the rebuilding process that the Bears have embarked on, both before Justin Fields arrived and now since Justin Fields has gotten there.
A lot of people jump on that and they're like, oh, you just don't like Justin Fields. And that's not it. He's like, I don't like the situation they're putting Justin Fields in, is the bigger takeaway. And it's hard to disagree with that. Like, when you like look at it, what have they done to help Justin Fields?
Well, nothing. They
have
no talent.
And tell me if you've heard this story before, that Chicago is going to try and solve their quarterback woes by changing coaches.
It's been done.
Now, to be fair, they did buck the trend and draft Justin Fields high, which is something that they typically had refused to do.
Yeah, they didn't want to do that.
So, okay, like that's a fair point. Like they have addressed one of the glaring issues that kind of leads them down that path. But on the other side of it, you just look and you're like, well, their offensive line is terrible. They have no weapons. You have a quarterback who's now learning his second system in 2 years. And if you want to look at the way you do this math gets a little funny sometimes, but it's his third offensive system in 3 years.
Right.
Because of the college one. It's just, I was high on Chicago last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one where I whiffed.
Misguided.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
I as much as I like Nagy, it was kind of hard to defend him at times last year, just the way they handled things. And some of that could have been the front office, because the front office had been terrible there too. And, I think they were tied together and they both knew that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also look at this division though, and it's hard to see where they get better. I know typically over the last
6
few
and
years,
11 last year.
Typically over the last few years, you've been a little higher on Minnesota than I have been.
Mm-hmm.
that comes from the irrational fandom distaste for them, the Eagles facing them in the playoffs and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have. If I go way back, I can find some hate for the
Right.
Vikings, but
they kind of let me down the year they missed the field goal. I was really rooting for Randall to
against the Falcons.
Yeah.
That was around the time that I was upset because they upset Miami near the end of the year. That I think Miami missed the playoffs because they beat them in like week
So,
15.
Obviously, a
or
big
like that.
Randall fan.
Yeah, I was a big Cunningham fan too.
Right.
So, but yeah, so I mean, honestly, right now their best overall player on offense, and I don't think anyone would argue this, is David Montgomery. Highest ceiling, obviously, is Justin Fields,
Right.
but he hasn't established
Right.
or done enough yet. Montgomery's their best offensive weapon.
Here's the thing: when we're having this conversation next season, right, or next offseason, like Justin Fields has to be their best player. We talked about the NFL owns Thanksgiving. By Thanksgiving, Justin Fields needs to be their best player. If he's not, they are in a world of trouble.
Yeah.
They're in a world of trouble because now all of a sudden they're sticking with Fields for a couple more years. But if Fields doesn't start to show signs of it this year, and I'm not saying he didn't last year. I believe that Justin Fields is a good, but like I just don't know that they have the guys around him. But you know what? I think you're going to start to hear is if they're in fourth place come Thanksgiving and the offense is bad, I think you're going to start to hear a lot of things you started hearing about Baker Mayfield. Like, oh, maybe he's not the guy. Like, maybe he's not this. Like, and that's unfair because you look at the guys that Baker Mayfield has had.
Oh, he's had way more talent
right.
on his teams.
And you look at the guys that Justin Fields has had.
It's not even comparable.
They had one good receiver and they let him go.
Now, the Bears have a multitude of wide receivers, but they're all like 3s and 4s. They just traded for N'Keal Harry from the Patriots, who completely was a bust for them. They drafted Velus Jones Jr. They have Darnell Mooney, Dante Pettis, and they signed Byron Pringle. They have Tajay Sharp and Equanimous St. Brown. But again, all those guys were 3, 4, 5s.
They have
their
a
other
bunch
teams.
of guys that like 2 decades ago wouldn't have been in the league because teams only used 4 and 5 wide receivers, not 6 and 7 wide receivers.
Right. I mean, there's guys that they're going to get opportunities. So if any of them are worthy of being like a number 2, they'll find out this year.
Yeah.
You would think, you would hope. Otherwise, I find it hard to see where this team is going to score 20 to 24 points every game.
No, when your best player is your running back and everyone knows it,
it's going to get rough. It's going to be bad.
Which is hard to have your quarterback. Like, it's easier to do it the other way. If you have good receivers and you're trying to get your quarterback going, well, you can force the running game. Running back is the position in the NFL where it seems like you can plug and play.
Right.
Yeah, everybody can find a guy.
They're defensively, their best unit is probably their defensive backs. They drafted Jaquan Brisker, so we're hoping that he has a good year from the Penn State connection, as well as Kyler Gordon. They brought in at cornerback, and they still have Eddie Jackson and Jalen Johnson now.
Right.
So like there's young talent there in the defensive backfield, but everywhere else it's hard to find a lot of names that jump out to you. Robert Quinn's a journeyman. Roquan Smith hasn't lived up to the hype that he had when he was drafted a few years ago.
Right, shows sparks, but not enough consistency for him.
Right, so it's tough to see how much. Can this Bears team win more than 6 games? They have a late bye. They don't have a bye until week 14, which is the weekend of December 11th.
Leading into the Eagles. Wonderful.
And obviously, they have to play the Packers twice. So it's
like, look at it. Do you? And I know we're not there yet, but just so a rhetorical question for the time being. We will place it later. But do you think they're good enough to beat any of their division teams twice? And I don't even know that they are.
No,
I'd say with Detroit, I feel like that's a home team wins kind of thing, or home team would be favored, and I'd have them as the underdog both games against Minnesota and both games against Green Bay.
Right.
And that's Detroit now. And who knows? We'll talk about them in a second, but
well, we got to do it. So
that's a tough first game. San Francisco defense, with the guys up front that San Francisco has.
So what's your final thought on Chicago and your rank in division and the number of wins?
Okay. So rank in division, I'm going to go. Well, so Are we doing all of the
Yeah.
talking and then ranking, or are we doing?
Is that how we did it?
That's how we
before?
have been doing
Okay,
it.
so
Like,
let's put a pin in the Bears then, and
yeah,
we'll move
yeah.
on to the
I
Lions.
I think they're going to struggle.
I
The
think
Bears.
Chicago's going to struggle as well. So we're to the Detroit Lions, second year with Dan Campbell, who I've always been a big fan of since his time down in Miami and his work down in New Orleans. I think he has an opportunity to turn it around. I'm hoping that they can do well enough this year that he gets a third year and maybe they finally figure out what they're doing at quarterback, because they're rolling with Jared Goff again. There's some people that have started to get on board with Detroit not being the bottom feeder in the NFC North. They started out really, it was a tough year last year. They actually took a step back. They lost 2 more games last year than they had the year before. They were 5-11 in 2020, went 3-13-1 last year. But they started to turn things down. And I think we actually talked about this last year. Well, I could see this team struggling in the early going, but then something's going to happen. Things are going to hit right for them, and they're going to be a tough out. So look what happened after their bye. So they started, 0-8? So they were 0-8, and they weren't even super competitive.
Right.
Especially in the games leading up to the bye. They got blown out by the Bengals, and then that Eagles game was just on Halloween was just awful. They went into the bye, and then they came out and they shocked a lot of people when they tied the Steelers at Heinz Field.
Just hate to see it.
Then they lost at Cleveland by a field goal. They lost to Chicago by 2. Then they beat Minnesota by 2. Unfortunately, they were blown out by the Broncos on the road, but then they beat the Cardinals. Like, that was kind of the beginning of the end for Arizona when Detroit beat them 30-12. They lost by 4 to the Falcons before looking pretty bad against the Seahawks, giving up 51 points. But then they beat the Packers. And I know Green Bay, I think, had sealed everything, so I'm not even sure Aaron Rodgers played in that game. But still, beat the Packers. So they win 3 of their final 6 games. The team, I think, started to play better. They were able to get it together. I think Detroit is better than a 3-win team in 2022. I'm very confident in saying that. And
I
think it has a lot to do with the coaching staff understand. I mean, do you remember that Thanksgiving game that was kind of rough to watch last year?
Yes.
Was it Aaron Glenn, the defense coordinator, trying to get, like, there was multiple times, and things looked a little out of sorts, but things moved in a better direction following that towards the end of the season. And I think the Lions are starting to respond a little bit. It's the second year under Campbell now. I think it's going to be a better year. Is it going to be a great year? No, I don't think so, because Goff, Boyle, and Bluff, they're not going to win you a lot of games with their arm. They're not guys that are single-handedly going to win
all
the
that
game.
we just said about Justin Fields, if you're ranking quarterbacks, I feel like the Lions probably have the worst quarterback in the division.
Probably, yeah. Especially if you're talking about ceiling or potential or room for improvement.
Right. It's so hard to figure out Fields right now, though, because they just were so bad, and it wasn't all his fault.
Right. But the Lions have better offensive weapons. While the Bears have David Montgomery, the Lions can roll out DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, and then Craig Reynolds and Jamar Jefferson had some good games last year as well.
Kabinda gets in there and
fullback,
things
baby.
out of fullback.
They brought in DJ Chark at wide receiver. Josh Reynolds had a good year last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown looked great towards the end of the year, was one of the better rookies in all of the class. And they drafted Jamison Williams.
Right. So I put 3 of those guys, Chark, St. Brown, and Jamison Williams, probably all 3 of those guys, I would say, I would take all those 3 before I take anyone on the Bears.
Yes. And then at tight end, now we didn't mention tight ends for the Bears, but Cole Kmet's finally, you need to do something now in Chicago, I think entering year 3. But in Detroit, they have TJ Hawkinson.
Yes.
Who I know maybe hasn't gotten as many catches or made as big a plays as people thought, but Hawkinson still has done more than Kmet has. So, again, while the stable of quarterbacks, especially Goff, may not be great, and you might like Justin Fields better, all the other offensive positions, including offensive line too, I say favor Detroit.
Oh, wholeheartedly agree.
Right, like you were talking
They got
Taylor
Sewell
Decker,
last
Frank
year.
Ragnow, Penny Sewell, Jonah Jackson. There's some very talented offensive linemen there as well. Defensively speaking, they've had some issues, but they drafted Aiden Hutchinson, who fell into their lap.
Right.
Same thing as Josh Paschal. So they added 2 new defensive ends to go to that rotation. They got local boy Alec Anzalone, a linebacker. Believe they re-signed him after a strong year.
Who came up with
Campbell from New Orleans.
From New Orleans, right?
Are they ready to challenge Green Bay? I don't know that I'm going to go that far.
Would I feel safe putting them in the category of, I feel like teams that have been so bad that are moving in the right direction? Yes, that's the category. Right. That's the label I would put on the Lions.
And they're going to start 1-0. It's like, it's just Eagles at Lions.
I'm not
1.
saying you're wrong. I'm just upset about it.
You'd be really mad if it did happen.
Yes, I'd be really mad if it happened.
So the annual Thanksgiving game, they get the Bills. So if they want to really make me happy on Thanksgiving, they could beat Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, which would be absolutely amazing.
You'd be thankful?
I would be very thankful.
I'm sure that text thread would be.
That'll be a good one, yeah. But Detroit is winning more than 3 games. They are not going to win 3 or fewer games this year.
Well, they have the Jets.
They have the Eagles.
Jets, Eagles, and Dolphins.
I know, right? There's 3 wins right there. Don't screw this. And the Bills. Come on. He's slam dunk. Slam dunk.
I feel like if you're a team like Detroit and you get Miami on the schedule and it's home, you got to be like, oh.
Well, my hope was that was going to be the Thanksgiving game.
Oh, yeah.
That was my hope. And now, because now it will be 8 years, so that's a possibility again. So, yeah. So, I without giving anything away, I'm higher on Detroit than I am on Chicago.
See, my favorite Miami Thanksgiving games would be when they play in Dallas.
That's what I want.
I feel like
as well.
I don't know that anything big or momentous has ever happened in those games, but I just
no, never. Long live Leon Lett. So the Packers, here we are. This is the 4th year with LaFleur. We know what they've been able to do in the regular season under Aaron Rodgers for over a decade now. I touched on it at the beginning before you got here. They are great when there's no pressure.
All right, these aren't playoff predictions. This is just regular season predictions.
When the pressure cooker turns up, the Packers have folded. So it's.
I know you just hate to see that.
I know. Yeah,
but I put this on you. You just nailed it early. Like I'm on board with it. I'm on board for the.
I have a really weird way of like picking out.
I know we've talked about it on the show, but like people just don't understand how good you are.
If I don't like someone,
sell.
Yeah,
sell
right.
High, right. So if there's somebody who's like a popular sports figure
that the society hasn't turned on yet,
right? And Joey doesn't like him, sell high. Like
get out while you can.
Jump off that bandwagon. Joey's on it.
We've seen it many times.
So many times.
It's funny that 2 of them are Packers quarterbacks. So I was hating on Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers before it was cool. Believe me. And you throw in Tiger Woods too. So I nailed all 3 of those.
Oh,
there's a long list.
It's
a long list. But in Green Bay, Rodgers signed a new contract. Last year was a weird year because everyone was like, "Oh, is Aaron Rodgers done in Green Bay after this season?" Right? No, he signed another extension. What's going on with Jordan Love? It's just the same Rodgers Favre thing is now happening with the Love Rodgers situation. It's really weird. They have good running backs still. Aaron Jones is a top tier ball carrier, and AJ Dillon is great right behind him. They didn't really miss Jamal Williams all that much. Wide receivers, a little bit of a different story now as they jettisoned 3 primary players, especially Devontae Adams gone to the Raiders, who we already talked about.
Basically on Devontae's
desire, yeah. And he supposedly it wasn't anything against Aaron. It was just more like I want to play with my college quarterback and
let's
play
take
in
a
Las
step
Vegas.
back. If somebody's like, "Hey, you can play," and Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback, which again is a big thing, but he's given that a shot. It's not like he's somewhere else, and then he has to pick between these two moving forward. Like he's given the Rodgers thing a shot and live in Green Bay, or you go play with your college best friend and live in Las Vegas
and signing the contract extension, right?
Right, contract extension. Oh, also in a state that doesn't have state income tax. And I know that people like throw that around. They're like, oh, it's just those are pennies to those guys. It's still a lot of money.
That's an easier choice to me if I've already won a Super Bowl.
I agree. But also, here's the other thing. If Derek Carr is your college best friend, does that maybe change the way, like, do you think Devontae looks at Derek Carr a little different than you and I look at Derek Carr?
Oh, yeah, easily.
Exactly. So I think he thinks they can win there. I'm not saying he
thinks
if you
Carr's
gave him,
better than Rodgers.
I don't think he thinks Carr's better than Rodgers, but I think he thinks that they have as good a shot there as that might be a bit of an exaggeration. I don't know that they have as good of a shot as Green Bay does, but like, I think he doesn't. He's not necessarily signing up for like, oh, I'm going to take more money and just be on a terrible team. I think he's saying like, no, I think we still have a shot, and I can get these other things too.
Right.
But I think he might view Derek Carr a little different than a lot of us. And I'm not, that's not a knock on Derek Carr, but like to go from arguably the best quarterback to a decent quarterback,
Yeah.
I
know it's interesting. They're not devoid of talent at wide receiver. They drafted Christian Watson, but again, I don't think in terms of the wide receiver talent that came out in the draft, I don't think people thought Christian Watson was a instant impact day one starter. He will be a day one starter, but I don't believe scouts expect him to be like Justin Jefferson or 2 years ago or Jamar Chase last year. Like he's not that type of talent. He's not going to come in and be phenomenal. Right. They have Alan Lazard. They have Amari Rodgers. They have Randall Cobb, who was brought back last year basically at the behest, basically demands of Aaron Rodgers. Right. Tight ends, they're at the twilight of the career of Mercedes Lewis. Robert Tonyan didn't have as great a years last year, but they're not devoid of talent there. They're fine. Their offensive line has always been weird because I feel like they always have injuries. They're always letting talent go. They still have Bakhtiari. They still have Elton Jenkins. They signed local boy Michael Mennett. They have another weird local connection, John Runyon Jr., Penn State product Rasheed Walker. None of those guys are starters or projected to be starters or anything. They obviously still have Josh Myers. They have a core back that is good. May be the best offensive line in the NFC North.
Yeah, when healthy, they absolutely
are. When healthy, huge thing. And they've been working on their defense. We saw that in the draft this year. Yep. They went to the national champion Georgia Bulldogs not once but twice in the draft to get Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. Now, they did lose Zadarius Smith to the rival Minnesota Vikings, and they had a whole weird thing with his injury and return, and then the offseason free agency was just really wacky with him, but they're still trying to improve that defense, and they went with the Georgia Bulldogs defenders, which on paper it's hard to argue with production there, but I know scouts didn't love both of those guys for various reasons, and we don't have the time to deep dive into that. But they have Jair Alexander at corners, one of the best defensive backs in the league. And, a few other guys that we like in Eric Stokes, Darnell Savage, and Rasul Douglas, and then Adrian Amos. So their defensive backfield is young and talented. And I on paper, even with the talent they lost, to me, they're still the best team in the NFC North.
Yeah, we have really gone to this spot of until I see different, I've got to go with them.
While the calendar says 2022, they will be one of the best teams in the NFC.
Right.
Now get back to us in January. Right. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, pencil them in to win the division and have a bye, and then they can pencil their golf plans for Super Bowl.
They don't have to worry about anything in February.
You can line them up for Radio Row, and
they will finally get to play in London. They'll play the Giants on October 9th at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. They were one of the final team that hasn't made a trip across the pond.
I don't know that the Eagles have.
Really?
They may have just in the last couple of years, though. I could just be wrong.
I'm betting you're wrong. I honestly have no idea.
It's a safe bet.
The Packers are. I feel like the Packers are always given that benefit of the doubt as one of like the NFL's shining jewels of legacy teams. Is the Packers, and if there's something that could be a little bit uncomfortable for them in some capacity,
So-
they're always the latest to have
So
to
just
do it.
real quick, if the Packers have an early playoff exit again, is LaFleur in trouble?
Well, I mean, didn't they do the same thing to?
Okay, let's throw fuel under the fire. And I know this a little bit because of how we may have talked about San Francisco, but what if San Francisco beats them in the playoffs again?
That would be.
I almost feel like it would be worse if someone else beat them, though. Like if you lose to someone else.
Yeah.
Like, because if it's San Francisco, I don't know. Like, then it could just be like, oh, we're a bad matchup and, they haven't. But, like, if they lose to, like, let's say they don't get the bye and they lose to a wild card team in the first round, in Lambeau.
Yeah,
the Eagles go in there and beat them.
I feel like they do that. I feel like they do that after having success, but not big enough success. They tend to move on. I mean,
Yeah, to be honest though, like watch if they don't win the division, if they do, but they're like the 3 or 4 seed, watch them make a longer run. Like if they go like 11-6 or something instead. Like,
yeah. I'm just trying to figure out. No, okay. I was trying to figure out because I didn't know if they fired Lombardi after they won the Super Bowl, because that'd be pretty crazy. I think
That would be
he went
pretty
out on his
nuts.
own, which makes a lot more sense. But they what didn't they? Yeah, they fired Mike Holmgren after he went 11-5 and lost to the wild card to the 49ers
yeah,
in 1998.
they went to the Seahawks and made them relevant.
A year after they lost in the Super Bowl.
Do you remember how like no one cared about the Seahawks when we were younger?
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
now I feel like that's a couple factors there. One, things were still a lot more regional at that
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
in terms of being able to follow teams and players. But like no one cared about them, and he went there and Sean Alexander.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. It's a big. Yeah. Yeah. So Holmgren's the one that jumped out. Mike McCarthy did have a few rough years and was fired mid-season. And that led to Matt LaFleur, who has posted back-to-back 13-win seasons, which is kind of crazy to think. Because I remember I was not high on the Matt LaFleur hire, and I also thought Aaron Rodgers was going to start to fall off. So I was wrong on both accounts there, or so it may seem. Although they haven't won the Super Bowl, so I feel like that's a little bit in my favor if they
Right.
can't get over this hump. But honestly, if they go 13-4 again this year, but lose divisional or lose the NFC Championship, how could you fire the coach that's won 42 games in 4 years?
I agree.
It would be tough to fathom. It
No,
really would.
I agree, and I feel like that would be foolish. We talk about patience, like
That would be absolutely the opposite of that.
right,
But also,
especially on the who are you going to hire?
well, and also, you're not wasting Aaron Rodgers' prime year. This is the end of his reign. You're gonna get rid of him, move on to a new coach, and then Rodgers retire, and then have to get another quarterback because they don't seem
Right,
sold
right.
on Jordan. It would be super weird and awkward. The only thing I could think of is if there was actual like more coaching blunders that they pinpoint to losing the game.
Right.
It's like, would it be better for them to get blown out?
Well,
I
so
don't
you look at
know.
So a lot of people kind of pin the decision to like try and kick the field goal or whatever, or to not go for it on 4th down 2 years ago against Tampa against him, because that was a big thing. Now this year they just laid an egg against the Niners, and Rodgers did nothing. So yeah,
Yeah. So the last team is the Vikings. They have a new head coach as well, with Kevin O'Connell taking over. Mike Zimmer was fired after the 2021 season, and O'Connell is the guy. The Vikings went 8-9
I heard
last
this
year.
the other day. Kirk Cousins' career record?
I'm guessing sub 500.
It's like 59, 59, and 2.
Oh,
Like it's,
two. I love
and
the
somebody's
two.
like, if that doesn't like perfectly
Define
like
Kirk Cousins
define Kirk Cousins
as a starter, I'm guessing.
But then they read his stats from last year.
He was
like,
really good last year.
He was like over 4,000 yards passing, had 33 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Like, and they underachieved. Like, you know, it's
right now, to me, he's the second best quarterback in that division. You have a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer with the Packers still playing at an elite level. You have Justin Fields, who has potential, a high ceiling, but isn't quite there yet. He hasn't shown as much as Kirk Cousins
and again,
has.
if you're a Bears
and
fan,
then there's
what
Jared
you
Goff.
want, as a Bears fan, what you want by the end of this season is to be able to argue, and still maybe most of the nation not necessarily agree, but like in your division with like the people who live like around you, like the Vikings fans, you want to have that argument where you're arguing that Justin Fields is the second best quarterback in the division or best. You know, like you want to be having, that would be incredible. But like they want to be able to argue and like have that tide starting to shift where more people like you and I are like, you can make that argument. You know,
right.
That's where the Bears need to be. The Vikings, that's their nightmare. Like, because you see these other teams, and you're like, oh, are the Bears going to get it together? Are the Lions getting it together? Packers still have Rodgers. You know, like, are we wasting this talent we have right now? Like, because they're a very talented roster.
Kirk Cousins underrated last year. Cook, Madison is a great 1-2 punch in the backfield. Wide receivers, Justin Jefferson has become one of the best in the league. They already had Adam Thielen, and they added Albert Wilson if he can get back to full health, and that's pretty much just passing over KJ Osborne. Plus, at tight end, Irv Smith Jr. has shown flashes as well. So the receiving core is very strong. I mean, Jefferson Thielen is one of the best, if not the best, 1-2 punch in the NFL over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and Cousins has gotten it done. Like, I know we like to bag on him for a while, and it made sense, but last year was not one of those. Now, I'm sure there are points that people would point out, oh, he lost the game, he threw this bad interception. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying he didn't have a bad game here or there, but he was not the reason for their issues.
Right. I feel like he's in a tough spot too, though, because like, what's he going to do? Be the best quarterback in the division with Rodgers in there?
Right.
No. So you need him to be the second best quarterback in the division, and he was by a mile.
Yeah.
Last year, the rest of the team wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
The rest of the team wasn't good enough last year. Their defense was awful last year.
Right.
I think they ranked 30th with Zimmer. Like, and they talked about how and that's why he got fired. Because the defense was 30th ranked defense.
Yeah, it was no good. So we already talked that they brought in Zadarius Smith, which is a big acquisition for them from the Packers. They drafted Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth, safety and cornerback from Georgia and Clemson, respectively. Brian Asamoah, I thought, was a good pick in the third round, linebacker from Oklahoma. And they have to get better, right? Defensively, they have to be better defensively than last year. And if you get a similar offensive production and you improve the defense even by 5 or 6 spots in the statistics, you're going to see a bump in stands. They were just under 500 last year. All of a sudden, 10-7, even 11-6 seems like a possibility for them.
Yeah.
Not saying that's what I'm pegging him that, but I'm saying it's possible because of how talented the offense has been. And how really well and underrated Kirk Cousins was last year. So,
early trip to Philly.
Yeah.
In my mind, I've got the gif of the Go Birds. The kid like, Go Birds. Your favorite.
God,
Your
love
favorite.
it. Yeah, gotta love it. All right, so that's the NFC North. We got to run through these real fast now. All right, start at the bottom. Who's finishing 4th in the NFC North?
NFC North. I'm going to go with the Bears.
Me too. So they were, what did I say, 6-11 last year. I don't think they're better.
I know.
So
I'm going to put them at 5 wins.
That's where I'm going to say 5-12 as well. 4th place in the NFC North at 5-12.
And then what are people going to do? Because everybody blamed Nagy. He's gone. New GM. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is. 3rd place, reluctantly, I'm still going to put Detroit there.
Yeah, me too.
But like I said, they're better than a 3-win team. I think
Oh,
they
yeah.
could easily get to 6 or 7
I'm putting them at
wins.
7 wins.
So I have them in third. I'll say 6, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them at 7. So I say third place at 6 and 11.
I hope they start with a loss week 1, and I hope the Vikings have a
And
loss week 2.
2.
But yeah, I'm gonna put them at 7 and 10, second place. We're gonna be the same here.
I would really like us not to be, but
This isn't the division. To
yeah,
do it,
no, the Vikings are my second place team, but I am going to put them at 10 and 7. I'm going to have a two win swing from them from 8 and 9 to 10 and 7. Bubble wild card team. We haven't figured that out yet, but I'll have Minnesota right there. I think there's a possibility. New coaching staff, offensive guy. Not that they needed help on the offensive side, but if that could bump them up even more.
Supposedly they're going to air it out. They say Justin Jefferson's really happy because they are going to air it out all the time.
Well, but that'll free up Dalvin Cook too.
Yeah,
because he's a great receiver out of the backfield. And you imagine a split back set with him and Madison, and then you roll out Thielen, Jefferson, and,
I know it's very
KJ
different,
Osborne.
but could this turn into kind of one of those Zimmer's kind of like Jeff Fisher kind of things where you get this change in system now to like a guy who's more, for lack of a better term, modern offense, and it looks completely different. I hope not, because I just
you don't want another good team in the NFC.
Hating against the Vikings.
Obviously, we have the Packers at number 1.
Yep.
I don't see them getting 13 wins.
13 wins 4 years in a row.
That's
hard
tough.
to do.
So I'm gonna bump them to. I still think they're probably 2 wins better than Minnesota. So I'll only bump them down 1. I'll say 12 and 5.
Yeah, I think 12 and 5 is a good spot.
And win the NFC North. So that's where we're at now. I know my dad texted me. He said his picks are identical to us: Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, and Chicago. That may be. We may be 5 for 5 or. What? No, how many did we do? Yeah. This would be 5 already, right? This is 5, so I think we might be 5 for 5. Now we're almost all very close.
But I feel like on this one is probably. I'm trying to think through the ones we've done. The one where it might be the hardest to go away from what we just picked. Obviously, we think so, but I could see someone being maybe a little higher on the Lions, and maybe some people are higher on the Bears. But I feel like the Bears.
I feel like.
This is going to be a reset year for the Bears. You got a new GM, a new coach this year, and they've got job security, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it's tough for me right now to see anything but what we just said play out.
Right.
Obviously, an injury changes things a lot.
Oh, yeah. If Jordan Love is starting a lot of games for the quarterback of Green Bay, it's
things could be way different.
Be a different picture.
Yeah. So that's it for the NFC North. We're gonna roll over now to the AFC North and take care of those teams. So we have the Steelers, Ravens, Browns, and Bengals. So we're gonna start in Cincinnati. Super Bowl runner-up. As crazy as that is to say right now.
Yeah.
And no one thought about it going into last year. I found it funny, and I know we're not doing the East right now, but apparently there's people putting money on the Jets to have a run like the Bengals did because, second-year quarterback. I'm like, no, it's not the same.
I can see it.
Go ahead, put your money on the Jets.
I'm just saying that because it's the Jets.
Because you know how much I dislike them. So,
actually, that is it. Not because of the Jets, because it's because of your dislike for the Jets that I'm saying it. You're right.
The Bengals are entering, crazy enough, year 4 under head coach Zach Taylor.
Yeah.
Incredible year last year. Now they were 10 and 7 in the regular season. That was good enough to win the division. Then they beat the Raiders in a nail biter. They beat the Titans in a nail biter. They beat the Chiefs in overtime in the championship. And then, their playoff run was crazy, and everything ended up breaking their way. They just couldn't seal the deal against the Rams in the Super Bowl. But what a year for the Bengals. Second-year man Joe Burrow. First-year player Jamar Chase. A huge breakout year from Trey Hendrickson. Joe Mixon became arguably a top 5 running back. And that's all with a very limited offensive line. Now, they sought to change that in free agency and the draft.
Yes,
and
they did.
And they certainly have. They brought in Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, and Lyle Collins all along the offensive line. They signed Hayden Hurst at tight end. And then they added to their defense in the draft with Daxton Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt, and Zachary Carter, the defensive tackle out of Florida, as their first 3 picks. Now, the biggest problem I have with the Bengals is I don't think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to take a step back. I don't think Joe Mixon is going to be a worse running back this year. I think their receivers are all top notch and their offensive line is better. I don't know if their defense is going to be able to duplicate the success they had last year. I also think they're going up against stiffer opponents at a minimum in the Baltimore Ravens, who were just a mash unit for most of last year.
20 some players on IR last year.
It's absurd. So, and they only went 10-7 and then had a lot of luck in the playoffs. I don't think this is a team that's going to all of a sudden be 13-4 and the number 1 seed. While I think the Bengals are talented, I still think they need another year of progression as well as possibly another off season of draft and free agency to shore up some positions before they're continually perennials competing for the AFC North title every year and trying to get back to the Super Bowl. I do think the Bengals are going to take a step back this year. I don't know if that necessarily means they're going to win less than 10 games.
No,
I think it's going to be tougher for them.
And they're going to be fun to watch, but
they're also playing a number 1 a division champ schedule now.
And it's hard. And you got these guys. So I think it's one of their safeties that they have contract dispute with right now.
Jesse Bates.
Right. And so you have some of these things where you start to have some of that.
Look at their last 4 games.
Everything broke their way last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the last 4 games.
Well, actually, look at their schedule after the bye.
Yeah, after the bye, they're at the Steelers, at the Titans, host the Chiefs, host the Browns, at the Bucks, at the Patriots, against the Bills, and against the Ravens.
Can you guarantee me 3 wins in there?
No. I think they'll win at least 3, maybe more, but you can't guarantee it.
Is Deshaun Watson playing December 11th? Probably find that out in the next 2 weeks.
And I bet he is.
Thank you, NFLPA. So I don't want to hear, NFL. No, you can talk to the players' union about that.
Well, and this is one of those things that I can't stand, and we can talk about it with Cleveland, but when people are like, oh, well, what's the kid from Atlanta with the betting?
Oh, Calvin Ridley.
They're like, he got a season. This is completely different, and Calvin Ridley needed to be suspended for the season. You can't gamble.
Yeah, we talked about that when that came out.
You can't do that.
That relates to the integrity of the product on the field.
Right.
The off the field stuff.
You're talking about messing with billions of dollars.
People are trying to. It's not an apples to apples situation.
Right. And they're these. I could screw this up, but these are exclusive. They're separate issues. Completely. They're not tied together.
No.
And notice the NFLPA on that one
didn't argue.
No, they're kind of
yeah, you screwed up.
You're kind of lucky you're not banned. That was, at least that's what it appeared. I'm sure that's not the official response they took, but that kind of just went away.
Well, I think their hands were tied because I think Ridley was just I'm accepting the penalty.
Right.
Of course, the NFLPA man had told him you need to accept this penalty.
Right.
We don't know. That's all subjective.
Exactly. But here, and
look, what this is. There's so much stuff.
I know.
The things that Deshaun Watson has been accused of doing, which still continues to be a he said, she said thing, because the justice system has said, we're done here.
Right. Which
again, makes things very difficult for the NFL.
Is a separate issue of whether or not that's the best or just outcome. I don't know. I don't. But that's a separate issue. But yes, that makes it all that more complicated. I feel like the NFL would have loved. I shouldn't say loved. It would have made some people's lives a lot easier if there would have been a more clear
criminal conviction,
as opposed to settlements that are have
Steals
all kinds of NDAs.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, it's tough. I don't envy this, but that's why I think the NFL's already said we want a minimum of 1 year, maybe more.
Right.
And that's why I'm this comes down to. This is an NFLPA problem now. People won't see it that way. They'll just be like, the NFL didn't do enough for Deshaun. No, the NFL tried to do it. Just like every single I see that. I've sent this to you multiple times. Everyone brings up Ray Rice and Ezekiel. Guess what? All of those guys got less games suspended because of the union, not the NFL. The NFL hammered all those guys. They were all reduced because of arbitration or through the NFLPA challenging it. The NFL
Now,
gave those guys more.
I get the Ray Rice one to an extent because I feel like that was botched by everyone. Because
Well, no, I'm not
it was a
saying
thing.
I'm
No,
not
no,
saying
no,
the NFL
no,
is
no.
without
Right,
blame for
right.
some of this.
But
I'm just
but
saying
neither is the PA, right? Like there's
Yeah,
enough blame to
exactly.
go everywhere, and everyone needs to take part.
and
in that.
by
But-
we are not defending any of these people.
No,
believe me.
yeah.
I'm just saying it's a weird situation when there's no criminal or in some cases even civil like charges, but people are still like, well, we believe that what you believe doesn't matter.
right.
And then you have like charges being dropped and things being and then people are convinced that this happened even though there's either no evidence or no criminal or civil response, but they still want the NFL to do like
Right.
that's a tough place to be.
Right.
It's a really tough place to be.
Right.
We covered some of the Brown stuff
Right.
here.
To cover that, I think he'll be playing by December 11th. I think it's going to be 10 games when it's all said and done.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I think there's going to be a 1-season suspension. I think either I forgive me, I forget the judge's name that was now overseeing the punishment.
Yeah,
I
I
cannot recall her name.
Right.
That's the independent person in
Right.
charge of the personal conduct policy. They got Roger Goodell out of the initial phase of it.
Good. Like you don't need the head honcho doing that,
But
especially in such a big business.
if
They need to delegate that.
if there's an appeal, that goes to him.
Right.
So
Which is why they need to separate it, though, because I believe before he was the judge
and
jury,
the appeal, right?
and
yeah.
the appeal. Like that's a bad look. It just in a systematic thing. So he's the guy. I don't have a problem with him being the appeal guy. Being the person
No,
and then the
I mean,
appeal,
it's
that
fine,
doesn't
but-
make logical sense. But yeah, like who knows? I just hold on because there are going to be hot takes galore, no matter what.
Oh, there always
the thing
are.
is gonna be.
Always are. But for some reason, I'm just thinking the way that this has gone and lingered, and he already missed a year last year.
And it keeps getting worse.
Well, and the Texans
it's not
just
getting
settled.
better. It keeps getting worse.
The Texans just settled for everyone that was suing them, and
Right.
they didn't accept responsibility for anything, but they
Right.
just decided
Which
to.
again is one of those where I could see that being one of those things where they like it's all like non-disclosed stuff.
Yeah.
But I could see the NFL having access to that
Right.
stuff. You know?
Yep.
Because how as the Texans are you gonna be like, no, you don't have access to that? Like I don't,
It's so weird. It's
it's
wacky.
very weird.
But anyway, so like Bengals are good. I just don't know that they can duplicate last year. We already started talking about the Browns.
Sorry, we're all
This
over
is
the
their
place.
third year under Kevin Stefanski. 8-9 last year, which they underachieved. They jettisoned Baker Mayfield because they brought in Deshaun Watson. Who knows if that's going to pay off? But they did also bring in Jacoby Brissett, who I guess would be set to take over the reins.
He's gonna be the starter. But they have to potentially play against Baker in week 1.
Right. Josh Dobbs also signed there. So they added some guys that have some talent, at least in the short term.
How about also
have
just
started
on top
a
of all
game.
this, Odell like forces his way out and then goes and wins the Super Bowl that
Yeah,
year. Like,
I know.
oh, that's
Yeah. So
it's a kick in the teeth to Browns fans.
they got rid of Austin Hooper and Jarvis Landry. But they added Amari Cooper, Chase Winovich.
There's still
in
talent
trades.
here.
There's still
talent
there.
here.
Absolutely still talent there.
But there better be because they don't have a first round pick forever.
I mean, they still have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the backfield, as well as DeErnest
Think-
Johnson.
Think about what they traded for Deshaun
A
Watson,
lot,
man.
a lot. They signed Jakeem Grant. They drafted David Bell. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones. So yeah, obviously there's talent there. They're expecting Amari Cooper to be more of a guy he was 2-3 years ago than he was maybe last year. But they re-signed David Njoku to a big contract. They have some talent along the offensive line with Batonio and
Yeah.
Conklin, Jedrick Wills. So, and their defense was very, very good at times last year.
So-
Clowney, Day, Garrett.
Talk about a guy, and I talked about this with my buddy Joe, who's a big Michigan fan. Chase Winovich, remember when he went to New England? Like,
yeah.
Everybody loved Chase Winovich like a start, and then he just fell off the face of the earth. Yeah,
We had a good first rookie year.
Yeah, but he had a run in with Belichick up there, I think.
So, they also have a second year of Owusu Koromoa at outside linebacker, very good last year. They have talent. Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, Greg Newsome, Grant Delpit. So there's talent there. 8 and 9 just wasn't good enough last year. And if they don't have Deshaun Watson, that completely changes where they're going. So if I'm banking on Watson being out, Cleveland's not looking good for me this year.
No. Yeah, they could be in trouble. But man, this division is crazy. This division's crazy. As clear cut as the NFC North is, the AFC North is.
If you told me this division could finish, and I mean, there's probably
given all of the unknowns right now, I would still say any one of the teams could win the division. Honestly, as of right now, Deshaun Watson currently suspended 0 games at this moment. I would say I would have the Steelers as the worst chance to win the division,
but not impossible.
Oh no, not a 0% chance. Knowing a significant Deshaun Watson suspension is coming, who knows how long, but significant. I'd say it has to be the Browns for me, just because of the other pieces that the Steelers have, but I still wouldn't put it at 0. But it's obviously going to take a huge hit whenever that plays itself out.
No, I'm with you. So let's move on to Baltimore here, as we're already running long. But the Ravens suffered to an 8-9 record last year. This year's going to be 15th year under head coach John Harbaugh.
That's unbelievable. That's got to be up there with the longest.
Got to be close, yeah.
Belichick, longer.
Yeah.
That might be it.
That may be it. I'm struggling.
It has to be.
Pete Carroll with the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Up there as well. He's got to be getting close to 15 years, right?
Yeah, he's got to be getting close.
But anyways, the Ravens, I'll say, won the offseason, but not in the they made the biggest deals. They made the best moves, which is something that front office does all the time.
Which people thought that was going away when Ozzie Newsome retired, and it hasn't.
Did he even officially fully retire?
I think he just isn't the GM.
He's not like the head guy.
He might be like special consultant kind of thing.
But they made
by the way, when he runs that franchise like he had, if he's like, hey, I kind of want to still keep a role, you say, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Free agent signings since March: Marcus Williams, free safety; Morgan Moses, offensive tackle; Michael Pierce, defensive tackle; Mike Davis, running back; Vince Beagle, outside linebacker; Brent Urban, defensive tackle; Kyle Fuller, cornerback; Brent Hundley, quarterback. All of those guys aren't flashy and maybe are fringe starters or special teams guys, but they all improve the team. They make the team better. I don't know that there's too many names that they lost in free agency that they're going to be unable to replace. I know a lot of people point to the trade of Marquise Brown. That one raised some eyebrows.
Right, but supposedly he's won it out for 3 years. You know,
And then all they did was have a phenomenal draft, especially the first 3 picks. Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame, people thought was a top 5 guy at one time, easily top 10. They got him at 14. Then Tyler Linderbaum, arguably the best interior offensive lineman in the draft out of Iowa. And then they got the injured David Ojabo, who probably will have a red shirt this year as he recovers from his Achilles heel.
And would have been a top or a
first round pick. Yeah, easily, for sure.
Gotten hurt last year.
And I know some of the late round guys that they added, people were very high on. Daniel Falele, the offensive tackle from Minnesota; Jalen Armour Davis, the cornerback from Alabama; 2 tight ends in Charlie Kohler and Isaiah Likely; and Jordan Stout is already turning heads, the punter from Penn State. Yep. So again, just phenomenal
strong kicking game there in Baltimore.
Yeah, for real. So absolutely excellent job by them.
Head athletic trainer fired.
Yeah. Ooh, ouch. I wonder why. So they did get rid of Don Martindale, Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator. So there will be a new system there, and it's Mike McDonald that's going to be leading them. But I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, they were essentially a 500 team last year, running out a practice squad.
Right. And then Lamar Jackson missed a bunch of games last year. Tyler Huntley did his best, but they brought in Brett Hundley as well. So that's a good 3D from them. Lamar Jackson, say what you want. I mean, when he plays, he gets the job done.
He's an MVP caliber quarterback.
They had right, exactly. I mean, he won it, just 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
Rodgers won the last two. So J.K. Dobbins tore his ACL, missed the entire year. I believe Gus Edwards did either that or his Achilles as well. Yeah. They should both be back. They signed Mike Davis, so they've got a great running back trio there.
I think they're believers in Rashad Bateman.
They are. That's the situation for the Ravens to overcome is the wide receiver position. Yeah. There's not a lot of
on repeat for years,
right?
Since Anquan Bolden was there,
really, yeah. And that was at the end of his career,
right?
Their most experienced guys with Bateman are what? Devin Duvernay and Tylan Wallace, maybe James Proche.
Yeah.
There's not a lot there. Luckily, they do have some good tight ends in Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. But plus, I also said that a lot of draft people were high on Kohler and Likely. Offensive line has always been a great spot for them,
and they got stronger.
And they got stronger. So Kevin Zeitler, Adam Morgan Moses, drafted Tyler Lindenbaum, and Daniel Falele. Have Jawan James, who's now back from the injury in Denver last year in the offseason when he wasn't supposed to be working out, and that whole fiasco. And Ben Cleveland as well. Defensive lineman, Calais Campbell. They drafted Travis Jones. They have Matabuki back. They brought in Michael Pierce. They still have Brent Urban. So, just talent all around. They re-signed, or they brought back Justin Houston. They have Josh Bynes, Tyus Bowser, brought in Vince Beagle. Odafe Owe last year was a huge stand. Patrick Queen is the starter there.
When they have Owe on one side and Ojabu on the other. Goodness.
Yeah.
And Patrick Queen inside.
Inside, right.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah, and they have Marlon Humphrey, Tony Jefferson, Marcus Peters, who missed most of last year. And they brought in Kyle Fuller and drafted Armour Davis and Marcus Williams as well. Right. They brought in Marcus Williams. Man. So, there's just... They're not going to be 9-8 or 8-9, whatever they were last year, this year, that's for sure. It's going to be... I think it could be a good year in Baltimore. And they play 4 divisional games in the last 5 weeks, including both games against the Steelers. So if they get nicked up again and suffer through injuries, things could get rough towards the end of the year. Yes. But they can probably decide their fate in those last 5 weeks.
Yeah, if they hang in there till December, it's there to be had in December because of all those division games late.
All right. Last but not least, or maybe for you, least, the Pittsburgh Steelers now playing at Chrysler Stadium. We're gonna talk. If we had time, we'd talk about the Heinz Field debacle. But
I said to my buddies, I'm like, you avoid this when you just go right for the corporate name that has no tie to the city and Lincoln Financial Field. Like, it'll always be the Lincoln Financial or the Link to me, but that has no.
I still call it the Bet.
has no sentimental meaning. Heinz being there, and I don't know if you watch the Pittsburgh Dad videos, but
occasionally,
it was great. He's like, there's no better money spent than somebody who gets the first naming rights to something in Pittsburgh. He's like, because everyone will forever call that Heinz Field. It doesn't matter that they changed it. Right. He's like, so they don't have to keep paying. We will keep calling it that.
So we were thinking about coaches that have been in the league a long time.
Yes.
We didn't mention Mike Tomlin, who's entering his 16th year
in the same division
as head coach in the same division. We just completely forgot
about it. What's the joke? Since World War II,
they've had 3 coaches.
Since 1970, there have been more popes than coaches of
the Pittsburgh Steelers. So first time in essentially 20 years that Roethlisberger isn't the quarterback of the Steelers. Most of those years was under Tomlin.
Boo moment for me.
First time since '99 that Kevin Colbert is not the general manager. They won't be playing at Heinz Field. You got to feel for Steelers fans. There's a lot of turmoil there in Pittsburgh.
This is like this is like franchise upheaval. Like to be clear, the GM retired. So like it wasn't even a firing. Like retirement is about as like much over like waves, rippling in the front office in Pittsburgh.
Really.
Like the beacon of steadiness there.
So out is Ben Roethlisberger. In is Kenny Pickett from Pitt.
Boo.
They also drafted George Pickens, the big wide receiver from Georgia, DeMarvin Leal, the defensive lineman from Texas A&M, and then Calvin Austin III from Memphis. Watch for him to be the next mid-round
circling
receiver.
back to a
that
conversation we
becomes
had
big.
earlier on the show, if you could be down on Kenny Pickett like now, that would be fantastic. Just your track record for nailing these things. That would be huge.
Right now I have this feelings of I don't like him because he's from Pitt, but like that's not what I'm talking about.
Right. And I feel like I have the reverse thing. I want him to be bad. So if you're out there, buy on the Kenny Pickett stock right now because it's going to go up because I don't want him to be good.
So you would think Mason Rudolph would have a leg up to be the guy since he's been in Pittsburgh for a few years.
He does not. He's probably third on this list.
But yeah, I'm not sure he does. Besides drafting Kenny Pickett, they also signed Mitchell Trubisky, who had one good year in Chicago, took a backup deal in Buffalo, and now is trying to rejuvenate his career with a one-year deal for the Steelers.
I feel like Trubisky could be a really good fit here for a year. Like I know they took Pickett in the first, but like Trubisky can move enough to hide some of the offensive line deficiencies, but is a pro, by this point. Like, he has that part of it. I don't know that it's going to work out that way, but like, I feel like it could have with Pickett there. Who knows how that's going to play out because that whole you got to, when you draft the guy in the first round, you got to play him kind of thing. However, if there's an organization that is dedicated to their own timeline, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh yeah.
And to be clear, Ben sat for a little bit. Now I know that was generations ago in football years, but
that does feel like a long time.
He wasn't rushed. They were all in on Tommy Maddox.
A freshman in college when that was happening.
I distinctly remember being in college and people yelling like Donovan McNabb sucks, and I'm like, your quarterback is Tommy Maddox. Like
now we can say your quarterback is Kenny Pickett.
Right. Kenny Pickett.
So this is going to be the Najee Harris year, I think, and they have a good stable behind him.
Last year it wasn't the Najee Harris year. It should have been last year.
With Edmonds, McFarland, and Snell there as well, they have a good stable there in Pittsburgh.
Najee Harris, another guy. Ross Tucker's not real high on him, is he? Is it Ross that's not high on him? There's somebody that is like they think he's just a guy.
Oh, I haven't heard Ross.
It might not be Ross. I might. It's someone else. They're like, oh, guys, I'm not saying he's bad. They're just like, they don't view him as a difference maker. They view him more as like in the group of running backs that like, yeah, he's good, but like you could have anybody there. And I was like, oh, that caught my attention.
Juju Smith-Schuster is gone, but they have Chase Claypool who needs to mature and step up. Deontay Johnson was the guy last year, by and large. He's still there. They drafted George Pickens and Calvin Austin, and they have Miles Boykin, plus their tight end of the future, Pat Freiermuth, looked great as a rookie last year. The Penn Stater is back for year 2 with Pittsburgh. If they want to have a great year, it's going to come down to their offensive line. And I don't know that they have the horses to compete with Baltimore and Cincinnati.
In this look at what the teams in this division have up front on defense.
Right.
And you're going to run out there with a shaky offensive line and we'll just say unproven quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm. Now, their defense can give teams fit as well on the defensive line with the Alualu, Hayward, Ogunjobi, and the draft of DeMarvin Leal, Devin Bush, they brought in Miles Jack at linebacker to pair with TJ Watt, the reigning defensive player of the year. I think Robert Spillane is underrated. Defensive back, we always talk about that. I know Minkah Fitzpatrick has been this ball hawk guy, and they have Joseph and Kazee, who have both played a lot. But I still feel like they're a little weak on the boundary, though.
No,
their cornerbacks,
they always are.
I know.
They always have amazing safeties and terrible corners.
Yeah. So I do think...
I say terrible.
They're not.
They're just
awful,
not like the other Steelers. And maybe it's because teams throw outside because of who's in the middle.
Yeah,
But
which probably a good idea. But in a league that relies on 4 or 5 wide receivers now, it's tough. Now,
your safeties, are going to get exposed in coverage,
Right.
and so are your corners if they're
So,
not there.
Yeah, now they do have, like we just talked about, Baltimore. Pittsburgh obviously has Baltimore in 2 of their final 5 games of the year, and they finish with the Browns. So Pittsburgh is coming off of what were they? What did we say they were in 2021? 9-7-1.
Right. Mike Tomlin has never been worse than 500.
Well, and he can't be 500. So is he
Right.
going to go? Are they going to go
And
8-9
last year
this
was a year where it was looking a little sketchy at times.
Yeah, it did. They had a rough go of it at times. Things looked a little bleak, but they turned it around. That tie to Detroit and then 2 straight losses made things a little rough.
Yeah.
They squeaked past the Ravens, but then lost to the Vikings. And they beat the Titans, but then get blown out by the Chiefs.
Right. But then they beat the Browns and beat the Ravens.
yeah,
and
to
that
end
Ravens
the season.
That win at the Ravens kept the Ravens out of the playoffs.
Yeah, then they lost to or no, sorry. No, I'm looking at week 1. Like, that's not right. That's not what I'm looking for. So then they went into the playoffs and they got beat up by the Chiefs, who they
Right.
had lost to a few weeks prior. I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to beat the Chiefs, but
No.
here we are the next year. A lot of changes in Pittsburgh. Let's do it. Let's do the AFC North. Where are we going? Who's in 4th place?
Oof. I am going to go with the Browns because of the unknown,
The uncertainty
at quarterback.
Yeah, so am I. They were 8-9 last year. I don't know if you take Deshaun Watson away, that team's not 8-9. They're worse than 8-9.
I agree. And so here, this is just a question. Like, there's going to be some heat on the coach for them not being good, but like, I don't know the dynamic. He's not the GM. So like, if he isn't the one who gives up all these assets and future assets for the quarterback who can't play, how fair is it to hold him to a high standard? You know, like, now if you want to say he didn't get Baker where he needed to be and that put us in a position where we need, that's fair.
Sure.
That's fair. But like, what are you going to do this year? You can't, like, I feel like you're tying his hands behind his back and then being like, juggle, you know, like it's,
yeah, it's a little rough.
like, no, I'm not saying, maybe they'll say, maybe there's an understanding there. Like, yeah, look, you know, this is a year where we need to get things in line. But
I know people will think, oh, the talent isn't that bad. Like, if Deshaun misses a bunch of games with the season, like, they'll still be good. But
they
I
go
just
from
think,
having arguably the best quarterback in the division to the worst.
right. But also, like, I look at what Deshaun did in, oh God, this was back in 2020 now.
Yeah, it's
what
been
he
a few
did for
years
a
since he
terrible
played.
Houston Texans team, the way he played, like, he was responsible for basically all of their wins that year, which
Right.
was only like 4.
Right.
But still, if he wasn't there, they lose every game.
Right.
So he could easily be responsible for 4 wins. So if I think this team without him is a 6-11 team, I think with him they're at least a 10-7 team, maybe 11-6 team.
Right.
But I don't think they're going to have him. So
Well,
I
you also have to factor in that the Browns.
right. So the bad things happen. I'm going Cleveland last. If Watson's out, I think they win 6 games.
I agree.
3rd place.
This
one, I don't think this will surprise anyone. I'm going Pittsburgh.
Yeah, me too.
So what did they went 9-7-1 last year? I think they find a way to get to over 500, and I think
so
they
too.
go 9-8.
I think the rest of the team is there. I think if Trubisky is the quarterback, I think they could be pushing 10 wins. I know that sounds crazy.
9-8.
I know, but like, I think, but like, basically what I'm saying
You
is,
think
I think if Trubisky is the quarterback,
year?
I think if they get Trubisky now, like second year Trubisky, basically, that they're better than last year's Steelers.
Hey, I could see it happen. We talked about we could
Right.
see, depending on how things
Because
go, any of these
This
teams
is
win
not
the
saying
division.
a career thing, but watching Ben play last year was
It was
painful.
rough. Yeah, it was rough. He was
couldn't
not
throw. And
yeah,
he
it was
couldn't
bad.
move.
It
Like,
was bad. Yeah, and they still went 9-7-1.
Right. Like, you watch those games last year. Mitch Trubisky, when he was bad, was better than what Ben was playing like last year.
Honestly, yeah. So they went 9-7-1 with Ben at 50% of what he was just like 3 years ago.
Right. Right.
So I'll stick with 9 and
But
8.
I don't know that Trubisky's going to be the guy.
Right. It could be Pickett. I haven't figured out how I feel
Right,
about Kenny
right,
Pickett, so
right.
I gotta wait a
No,
little
we
bit.
know how we feel. We don't know if we can
don't want it to be
justify it
good.
in reality.
If he didn't go to Pitt, I might be like, yeah, okay. I guess no, I can't have Pitt be good in any way.
Well, and as Ross says, his hands are too small to play in a city like Pittsburgh.
I love that people just like don't get it. I'm going Cincinnati in second.
You gotta be kidding me.
Cincinnati in second. They went 10-7 last year. I'm going to put them back at 10-7. I think.
Yeah.
So Pittsburgh 9-8, Cincinnati 10-7. I think they got better on offensive line, but I think some things broke their way that I don't know that will happen this year, especially the way the playoffs went down. I'm a big believer in Burrow and Chase. I mean, they have a great wide receiver core and offense. Something to me says we're not going to see that kind of play again a second year.
Right. So I feel like everything went against them 2 years ago when
And everything went right last year.
Burrow got hurt.
Yeah.
Everything went right last year. They'll probably settle somewhere in the middle this year.
Yeah. So 10-7 sounds about right to me.
Right.
So obviously then we have the Ravens winning the division. I think they're better by multiple games.
So do I.
So
I'm gonna go because you went. I agreed with you.
sure.
I'm gonna put them at 12 wins.
That's what I was gonna say. Yes. So I have Baltimore 12-5, which is a 4-game
So
swing.
by the way, I'm gonna be given a hard time now because my mom's gonna listen to this and she's gonna be upset that we were so high on the Ravens. But if we talked bad about the Ravens, then she would have been mad about that too. So
for the Joe Mays and J-Raff show official record keeper, my Uncle Rich, you'll have to write this one down. And Justin and I are the same, but my dad's a little different. He has Pittsburgh last, Cleveland third, Baltimore second, and Cincinnati in first. So there you go. So Bengals, Ravens, Browns, Steelers 1-4 for my dad. Whew, yeah. So we did it. We got through the North Division, those 8 teams. Interesting divisions, completely opposite. I feel like there's only one way the NFC North can finish, whereas you could tell me any combination of the teams in the NFC North and I'd be like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I'm telling you, and maybe it's if Trubisky beats, or if Pickett beats Trubisky out, that could be signs of this too. But if Trubisky is the quarterback, because he wins the job, not by default, I'm telling you, I think that's a sneaky good thing for the Steelers this year.
Mm-hmm.
And could be good for them in the long term to give Pickett a chance to kind of adjust to the NFL.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, it was good to be back and talk some NFL. We have one more of these shows where we're going to have to cram in the East divisions,
The divisions that matter.
the playoffs, and Super Bowl predictions. So it'll probably be another really long show in 2 weeks. So I don't know exactly how Justin's going to be handling that one.
We'll figure it out.
But we are unfortunately have to miss next week. We're both either out of town or have events. So no shows next week. 2 weeks from now, episode 362 will be our final NFL preview, part 4 for the 2022 season. And then this show is done until most likely sometime in November-ish. I mean, I want to be back to talk pro football, but the longer we're not here talking pro football means that our high school team that we cover is doing very, very well. And that's always what we want from the Wilson Bulldogs. So
I just started not looking, but really kind of dissecting football schedules and like what that affects my schedule for the fall. So,
right.
In calendar mode this week. So.
Yes, very much so. But we will be back in 2 weeks' time to finish our NFL preview. Anything else from you? Any shout outs? Anything to say?
My niece's birthday is in a few days. So
well, yes.
Turns 3.
Happy birthday to Sunny.
Yep.
Or almost. And happy belated to my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, both celebrating over the last week. Happy early birthday to little Addie Berenshausen. That's coming up in a couple weeks' time. And no one else of note celebrating anytime soon, right?
Nope.
Remember, July's the worst month. Just keep that in mind.
Wednesday, the peak of the sports year.
When we would normally have our show a week from now, July 24th, will be this guy's birthday. 48. So congratulations on that. And also Laura. Laura's birthday is coming up too. Yeah. So yeah, lots of July birthdays. I mean, I mean, close. It's close enough, right?
Well, yeah, we just group in July. You just kind of group it all in.
Well, didn't you also share a birthday with Alexa?
And Alexa's grandfather.
That's crazy. So many
Yes.
July birthdays.
Yes.
Good for birthdays, not so much for sports. And then this week coming up is like the end. There's a couple of days where there's literally like nothing of note in my sports life. I know there's other stuff going on, but there's nothing of interest for me because I know there's.
You're not tuning into the women's Euro
Oh,
finals?
sorry, I am not.
Okay.
I'm not doing the soccer thing. I'm not doing the esports. I'm not doing MMA or boxing or whatever fighting, UFC. No, I'm not doing any
I
of
felt
that
old
stuff.
the other day. I might have been yesterday. I turned on and there was like UFC on like during the day, and I'm just like, what is this? As I changed the channel,
No.
I immediately was like, man, I sounded old, but
All right, everyone. It's good to be back. Thanks for listening, and we'll finish our NFL preview in 2 weeks.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, brought to you by Mays Sandwich Shop. You can watch each weekly episode live on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. You can also rate and review us on many of these platforms as well. We'd love to hear from you. Send your email to the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. The Joe Mays and J-Raff Show is a part of the JMNJR Radio Network, home to other productions such as the Bulldog Hour, Tangents with Friends, and Nat Chats with Dad. Until next time.